and National Treasury take us through everything so that we can then schedule the departments now to come in program. The third term is literally 8 meeting days, only 8. It's a 4-week term. So we will have to probably find a special permission to block off one of those weeks and meet 9 to 4 for all of them. And we complete this schedule once. As I'm sure you've seen, some of the things are as far back as 2006. And it's not right, for lack of a better phrase. So this morning we are really in Treasury's hands to take us through department by department in terms of the circumstances. And at times Treasury does make recommendations. So DDG, feel free to, where you feel the need to make recommendations to us in terms of how you feel this should be handled, do that, so we get you thinking as well. So colleagues, that is really this today, right? And Treasury's got all the time to go through this, so by the time we meet departments, we are well versed on it and move on it, because they must come and present their case. Some of it we will, I imagine, we will condone. Some we will take from the baseline, right, budget. Some we will take from the revenue fund. So there's going to be a whole matrix, but we have to understand the rationale of everything in terms of how they arrived at unauthorized expenditure. Right, so I'm gonna, the minister phoned and wrote. He's abroad on official business, and so is the DM, but it was our feeling that in any case, because of the exercise we're doing, their presence is neither here nor there, but they did apologize for being here. So let me introduce the colleagues at the far end there, so you just know who you're talking to. The gentleman who's got his hands clasped to his chin and has just moved them. That is the Honorable Liz, aka Mazamban. And then next to him is the Honorable Van Minen. And then is the Honorable Mani. And then is the Honorable Siweya, Honorable Somyo, Honorable Bucas. My name is Mkhuleko Hlengwa, and we are accompanied by the full secretariat in its material facets, research, content advisory, and so on of the committee. So, Madam DDG, thank you very much for being here with your team. From here on, we are completely and entirely in your hands. So, take us through, and then we'll manage time. But we've dedicated the full day to this, so don't feel yourselves under any pressure or any rush, so that we can complete this exercise. Even the things we are inheriting as far back as 2006, we will complete them for you, so that the 7th Parliament doesn't inherit outstanding unauthorized expenditure matters. So, Madam DDG, over to you. Colleagues, right? All right, sharp.
Chairperson and honorable members, thank you so much. I think I can go ahead. Thank you, Chair. My name is Mampo Modise, and I'm the head of public finance. Because of the discussions, we decided as a team that we're going to bring the experts. So, Honorable Member, be rest assured that the team will go through all the reasons that are in the bigger document. I think the reason why we decided to do the presentation this way is so that you can have reference and you don't have a much thicker document if we have a memorandum that accompanies the presentation. But they are here and they will address all the issues that are there. Chairperson, first of all, I think we would want to appreciate the fact that the committee is here at the Treasury. And I think the last time we saw nice food was before COVID. So thank you so much for being here. At least now we have beverages. But I'm Mampo Modise, and the team will introduce themselves as and when they start presenting. So, Chairperson, this has been a long-standing matter, and we have been trying to bring it to the committee's attention because we think it makes it difficult for departments to function if they have this unauthorized expenditure that they have to deal with. So basically, today we are bringing the departments that have registered unauthorized expenditure, and we work with the departments to understand what caused it. They've done investigations, and we feel comfortable that the matter can be then presented to the committee. There are other departments, if you look at the presentation later, that are not ready. And we thought it won't be appropriate to bring those because we wouldn't have any recommendations because they're still investigating. So those matters will still be outstanding, and we will communicate with your office as and when they finalize so that we can see if you can consider the matters. But you have enough matters on your plate so far. So basically, Chairperson and honorable members, the definition of what we are bringing to your attention is what we refer to as overspending. So overspending is when a department uses money that they don't have in their total budget or in their program. So for example, this administrative program, if they spend more than what is allocated, then that is classified as overspending. But also, if
Sorry, just a preliminary question. Just a quick one. Just to check, in the departments that are still coming, is National Treasury one of those departments? No.
Because we have irregular, not unauthorized.
Can I request this? We will take all questions at the end of the presentation. General SAP. All questions. I know there's the issue of independence, and we are dealing with that matter. It's scheduled for the next term. Today is unauthorized because that is the matter that comes to us to process with Parliament. So that's the scope for today. The IFMS matter is on our radar. We've had 2 meetings already, I think, with the minister, and we are in the process of bringing all the affected parties, including CETA, Public Service Administration. So we'll take all questions at the end. So, Madam DG.
Thanks, Chair. I was actually going to explain the difference between overspending and irregular expenditure. Because the departments that are here, the focus is on overspending, where they spend money that is not allocated to them as a department or not allocated to them as a program. But also, if departments have spent money that is allocated for one thing on something else, that expenditure is then classified as unauthorized expenditure, which is completely different from irregular expenditure, which deals with procurement-related matters. So today we only bringing to your attention those departments that have unauthorized expenditure. So, Chairperson and honorable members, when we then have to look at the recommendations on how these departments must deal with the unauthorized expenditure, there's 2 ways in which the department can correct for the unauthorized expenditure if the committee sees fit that it must be condoned. The first one is the spending can be a direct charge or against the National Revenue Fund, where the department then we allocated additional funding for them from the National Revenue Fund if we think the reasons for the over expenditure or unauthorized expenditure are legitimate and they've put in place enough controls that this doesn't take place. And secondly, another way in which the committee can look at unauthorized expenditure would be basically to get the departments to pay for the money that they use that was not authorized through their future budget allocations. This can either be done as a full amount in the next year, or for small departments, mostly we tend to recommend that the money be taken out of their budget over a period of time, because we also have to consider the functioning of the departments rather than only focusing on the unauthorized expenditure. So, Chairperson and honorable members, these are the departments that we are bringing to your attention. Some of them have 1 year of unauthorized expenditure, but some of them have more than 1 year of unauthorized expenditure. So I'm just going to ask the chief directors that are responsible for the departments as they see them on the screen, please take over and just present your departments. Thank you so much, Chairperson. Ulrika, you first.
It's very difficult with the Good morning, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members. My name is Ulrika Dritten. I am the Chief Director in Public Finance responsible for the kind of built environment departments. So it's the Urban Development and Infrastructure departments. So I will take you through. The first one is on the Department of Cooperative Governance. And this relates to overspending in Program 1 in the department's budget, the administration budget. That relates to the administration and the implementation of the Mshlapo Commission, which was the Commission on Traditional Leaders, Claims and Disputes. There are two components to the overspending of 1.123 million. That is made up of overspending on travel and subsistence claims for the work of the Commission and legal fees surrounding the disputes in the work of the Commission that was not budgeted for by the department. So when the Commission was set up, there wasn't a defined budget given to the Commission for the work that it did. Some of these claims, specifically around the travel and subsistence, happened after the fact, and as a result, resulted in overspending on the overall program. The way to deal with these kind of activities would be, under normal circumstances, would be to move money from other programs in the department, so shifting funds from goods and services in the other programs to compensate for this. The department did not do that, and as a result of that, had then incurred overspending of 1.1 million in administration. So even though the department had budget, it had this overspending in Program 1, which is then resulting in unauthorized expenditure. The department could not give us any evidence of the consequence management and what they had done to recoup some of this money in the event where there were some losses, or what the disciplinary processes was around all of this. And as a result of that, we are recommending that these funds then are recouped from the budget of the Department of Cooperative Governance to cover for this. Thank you.
Good morning, Honourable Chairperson, Honourable Members. My name is Gillian Wilson. I'm responsible for the Administrative Services Departments, which include the Central Government Department. So I will be presenting to you the unauthorized expenditure of the GCEO, of the DPSA, and also of Stats SA. Those are the three departments I will be presenting. So the first department relates to unauthorized expenditure incurred by the GCEO in 2013-14. In December, there was the funeral of former President Mandela. So the unauthorized expenditure relates to the funeral activities of the funeral of late President Mandela. So the GCEO was responsible for communication activities in relation to the funeral. The funeral activities was implemented late in December, so that was post the adjustment budget. So we didn't have a budget process to allocate additional funding to the department. We also wanted departments to use the existing budgets to to accommodate the additional funding that's required for the funeral. So the department had a lot of cost savings measures to make sure that they do not have unauthorized expenditure. So They've also, as part of the cost saving, they have postponed costs relating to stationery, to catering, to venues, and through that they could shift funding from the other savings and other programs to the program that dealt with the activities relating to the funeral of former President Mandela. But in the end, they could not cover all the activities or all the costs relating to the funeral, and there was an unauthorized expenditure of 3.696 million in the department. Due to the fact that our analysis showed that the department did everything to avoid unauthorized expenditure in terms of cost savings, in terms of filling vacant positions was also delayed, we do recommend to the committee that this authorized expenditure be financed as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund. So we also had another amount from the GCIS. Next slide. Which is 710,000 in the administration program. So this relates to the newly formed created Ministry of Communications that was a breakaway from the GCIS at the time. The department was responsible to create a corporate services and also a ministry for the new department. The department also did some cost savings and funding was reprioritized from other programs to avoid the unauthorized expenditure. In the end, they could not cover an amount of 710 million thousand as unauthorized expenditure. But our analysis also showed that the department could have delayed the filling of positions in the ministry, and through that they could have avoided the unauthorized expenditure. So our recommendation to the committee is that the unauthorized expenditure of 710,000 be financed as a reduction of the department's future budget allocations. That two slides cover then the GCIS. The next one is the DPSA. So in 2013-14, the DPSA incurred or reported unauthorized expenditure of 8.8 million in 2013-14. This unauthorized expenditure emanated from overspending in the administration program in the ministry sub-program. The unauthorized expenditure was incurred because the department had to appoint an advisory body for the minister and also appoint additional members in the ministry. There was a gazette in 2012 that set guidelines for the advisory committee for the minister. The gazette of July 2012 indicate clearly that the advisory body should consist out of 5 members and 2 special advisors. The department appointed 9 members and 2 special advisors, which was above the requirements set out in the government gazette. The budget in the minister's office was also increased from 41 million to 68 million. The department did also shift money from other programs to cover this unauthorized expenditure, but in the end they could not cover an amount of 8.8 million, which was incurred as an unauthorized expenditure. Our analysis showed that the unauthorized expenditures could have been avoided if the department had applied the regulations in the government gazette of 31 July 2012. The capacity needed in the minister's office and the financial implications have been part of the planning and the objectives of the department. And we also are of the view that the members appointed should have been in line with the Government Gazette of July 2012. So our recommendation to this committee is that the unauthorized expenditure should not be approved by the committee. If it is approved by the committee, it should be financed as a reduction in the future budget allocation for the department. The implication is that if it's not approved, then the department should conduct an investigation, which was not done. My last one relates to Stats SA. Stats SA incurred unauthorized expenditure 37 million in 2017-18, 56.7 million in 2018-19, and 47.6 million in 2019-20. This is due to a budget reduction in compensation. We did implement a reduction in the ceiling of compensation for the department from 2016. At that time, the department was underspending in compensation. So we wanted to bring the compensation ceiling in line with the spending in compensation by the department. So when we implemented the compensation ceiling, the department did implement some measures to avoid unauthorized expenditure. They've placed a moratorium on the appointment of filling of vacant position. They've also looked at other savings in other programs in relation to the goods and services. And the department did shift funding from the other programs to the program that was overspending in compensation to avoid unauthorized expenditure. But there was instances where the department could have shifted funds because there was overspending in some programs and there was underspending in other programs. So the department didn't make fully use of the opportunity to avoid the additional the unauthorized expenditure by shifting the fund to the programs that is overspending. So our recommendation to the committee is that for 2017-18, that 11.3 million be charged against the future budgets of the department, because the department didn't fully utilize savings in other programs to cover the overspending in the program that was overspending. 26.4 million be financed as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund. In 2018-19, we do recommend to the committee that 7.8 million be financed against future budgets, because again the department did not fully make use of the savings in the other programs to avoid the unauthorized expenditure. And in 2018-19, that 28.9 million be charged as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund. In 2018-20, 47.6 million unauthorized expenditure be charged as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund, because in this instance, the department did implement cost-saving measures. They did look at underspending in other programs to shift funds to the program that is overspending to avoid the unauthorized expenditure. Thank you.
I'm going to request the esteemed members of the Fourth Estate to desist from the running commentary that is coming from that side. Like, it keeps coming in and out, in and out. We're all trying to respectfully, please.
Okay, thanks, Chair. My name is Spencer Janari. I'm the Director. I work on basic education. And so I'm going to take you through DBE's unauthorized expenditure incurred in 2014-15. So in 2014-15, just to start, the department spent 19.5 billion of the 19.7 billion allocation, so 99.7%. So there was no overspending on the vote, but there was an overspending of 6.488 million in one of the main divisions, and that then constituted unauthorized expenditure here. This 6.5 million was spent on the National Teacher Awards. It was an additional spending on what was budgeted or allocated for this particular ceremony, which annually celebrates and acknowledges public schools and teachers, and particularly acknowledging their outstanding performances. So in this year, the department had in fact planned to spend more than what was initially budgeted on the program, so it was an unexpected additional expenditure. But they had planned to shift money from other areas of where savings were incurred to cover these additional costs. What resulted in the unauthorized expenditure is that the department was only planning to make these shifts after the 31st of March, and it was at this point they realized that they needed Treasury approval to make those shifts, because it was for earmarked allocations. At the time for a mass literacy campaign, there were savings on that Kharikudi program, and they needed Treasury approval to shift that money. And it was too late to get Treasury approval, because Treasury approval is not granted after the fact. It was already after the end of the financial year. So that then led to their unauthorized expenditure. The steps taken by the department to prevent unauthorized expenditure in future and action at the time, they took no disciplinary action against anybody. There was no funding to claw back. As the unauthorized expenditure, no official benefited from it, and the money was used to provide goods and services towards a planned activity that is part of the normal activities anyway. And then the resultant overspending on the main division is unauthorized expenditure. And because they didn't make this request to the Treasury before the 31st of March as they were supposed to, that is poor financial management on the department's side. And as a result, the recommendation is that the unauthorized expenditure should be financed as a reduction of the department's future allocation. In other words, the department must pay back the money. Thanks.
Thank you, Spencer. Good morning. I'm BBC. I work in Health and Social Development Chief Directorate. I'm going to talk you through two unauthorized expenditures, the one for social development and, again, BBC. All right, my name is BBC Malika. This will be for Department of Social Development and for the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. For Department of Social Development, there's an error there. It's supposed to be for 2019-20. It's not 2014-15. Apologies about that. For the Department of Social Development, the year of the unauthorized expenditure is 2019-20. So there's an error here. It's not supposed to be 2014-15. Thank you. So in March 2020, which is still part of the financial year 2019-20, Presidents announced that we were likely to have, they were already planning for a lockdown, and announced that the social grants will be paid earlier, which means the social grants will be paid in March 2020. Because social grants will be paid in March 2020, that makes the payment a 2019-20 payment, not a 2020 1920 payment, not a 2020-21 payment. The social grants were budgeted in 2020-21 payment. So this meant that the April grants were paid earlier, and because of that, we ended up with unauthorized expenditure in 2019-20. So this was not a function of negligence at all on the part of the department. It's a result of an emergency response that was required. For that reason, we request that this, or we propose, or we recommend that this unauthorized expenditure be financed as a direct charge against the National Revenue Fund. This is also because it was already budgeted for within that financial year, so it was not an error on the part of the department. Thank you. On the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disability, this unauthorized expenditure we're talking about resulted in 2011-2012. That was when the department was still the Department of Women, Children and People with Disability. This unauthorized expenditure of 27.3 million emerged from overspending on the main division, and this consists of 25.5 million in Program 1, which is the admin program, and 1.8 million in Program 3. The unauthorized expenditure emerged from the department appointing additional officials at higher notches than they were supposed to and that they were budgeted for. And so these were unfunded posts and they were funded at a higher level. National Treasury had alerted the department in that specific year, at least in Q3, about the projected overspending for the year. And the response was not, the department didn't respond accordingly to rein in the cost. Mitigating circumstances and actions in that specific year. What we have seen is that the CFO and the DG had since resigned in 2012. So the National Treasury had to engage actively with the new DG to find mechanism to address and enhance the functioning of the department, which is the thing that led to the department, National Treasury recommending a chief financial officer, an official from Accountant General to act as a chief finance officer for the department for a year. This measure resulted in good outcomes for the following year until 2015-2016. For this unauthorized expenditure, we had proposed or recommended that it be financed from the reduction from the department's budget. And this should be spent or should be spread over 3 years just to make sure that it doesn't affect the department's functioning excessively. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, and good morning, honorable members. My name is Mashudu Bija, a director within Justice and Protection Services within Public Finance. I'll be taking you through 2 departments, which is the Department of Correctional Services and Independent Police Investigating Directorate. Okay, I will start with the Department of Correctional Services. The unauthorized expenditure arose in 2015-16 financial year. The unauthorized expenditure was 121,000 rands, and this was due to adjustment of housing allowances for employees below salary level 12, as well as adjustment to the medical aid contributions. In our view, with proper financial management, we believe that this unauthorized expenditure could have been avoided, since overall compensation of employee budget was underspent. The department did indicate some mitigating actions and steps to prevent unauthorized expenditure. For instance, there was presentation of IYM reports to Budget Committee, National Management Committee and the Audit Committee, and conducting of monthly financial meetings to discuss financial issues that led to irregular and unauthorized expenditure. However, notwithstanding all these mitigating actions and steps taken by the department, we are still of the view that this unauthorized expenditure, our recommendation is that it should be financed as a reduction of the department's future budget allocation. Okay, with regards to the Independent Police Investigating Directorate, the unauthorized expenditure emanates or dates back to 2005-06 financial year, as well as 2008-09 financial years. In 2005-06 financial year, the overspending of 91,000 rands was due to the printing of hard copies of the department's strategic plan for the period 2006 to 2009, as well as the printing of hard copies of its annual report for the 2004-05 financial year. The quotation for these prints was higher than the allocated budget, and enough funds could be shifted to the program to offset the excess expenditure, as the 8% violent limit in terms of Section 43 of the PFMA would have been exceeded. But however, in our view, we believe that the department could have reduced the number of printed copies to align the quotation with the available budget, as simple as that. In 2008-09, the overspending of 800,000 was due to an unanticipated interface on the department's PESAL system, which occurred on the 30th of March 2009, which was a day before the end of the financial year. The interface affected the compensation of the employee budget, and the amount involved was more than the available budget on compensation of employee. Then this resulted in overall overspending at a vote level. In our view, this overspending could have been avoided had the department ensured that there was regular monitoring and clearing of its suspense account as required by Treasury Regulations 17.1.2. Mitigating actions and steps taken by the department to prevent this unauthorized expenditure. The department implemented internal controls and some cost containment measures. And as a result, there has not been any unauthorized expenditure recorded after the 2008-09 financial year. However, notwithstanding these mitigating actions, we still believe that the unauthorized expenditure should be financed through a reduction of the department's future budget allocation. Thank you, Chair.
So, honourable members and honourable chairperson, in the Department of what was then Telecommunications and Postal Services, which is now the Department of Communications and Digital Technologies, the unauthorized expenditure relates to membership fees for payments to international organizations listed in the second bullet on your slides. So at the time of preparing the budget in December 2012, for the 2013 year, the department had budgeted for its membership fees, which they pay in dollars, at the existing exchange rates, and during that period, they normally pay they pay these membership fees in the last month of the financial year, and during that period, the rand depreciated by 21%, which resulted in an overspending of 4.7 million rand in the department's budget. The department could have come to us and asked us to do a virement to increase transfers from underspending in other areas of the budget, to compensate for the depreciation in the rand and the increased membership fees that they now needed to pay. And they did, but they only came after the end of the financial year. And we don't provide approvals for shifting of funds after the fact, after the year has ended, which is what they had asked us to do. But even if we could do it before the financial year, and if they came before the financial year, the department had asked us to reduce the transfer to the SABC to make these payments, which in terms of the Appropriation Act is not allowed, because the Appropriation Act only allows us to reduce transfer payments to other institutions within a main division. This would have been across two main divisions, so between programs. So whether the area that they identified the savings in, we could not legally move to compensate for this. And because of the department's late submission and the fact that we would have known that we all saw quite earlier on in the year that there would be some kind of shortfall, that they actually finance this from future allocations in the department. So that's for communications. For the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, this relates to expenditure transfers that needed to be made. Next slide, please. Yeah, 17. Okay, so this relates to the Integrated National Electrification Program and transfers that needed to be made to a municipality that was rejected on the system. So at the time when all of this was happening was also when we initially split the original Department of Minerals and Energy into the Department of Energy and to the Department of Mineral Resources. So in 2009-10, we had these payments that needed to be made on INEP in terms of the Division of Revenue Act. It got rejected on the system, so there was some kind of technical glitch on the system because the municipality's bank details weren't verified. It got rejected again in April, and the department then only transferred the money in May to the municipality. But at the end of the financial year, this would have reflected as underspending on the department's budget at end of 9-10. The department then, instead of coming to the Treasury to ask for a rollover of these funds, because that's what they should have done, they proceeded to make the payment without the money actually being in the budget. And once they had verified all these details, they didn't ask for the rollover. The internal audit had looked at all of these processes because transfers, intergovernmental transfers between national government and municipalities is governed in the Division of Revenue Act. This was not gazetted to that municipality in the Division of Revenue Act, and the internal audit had investigated and looked at all the kind of poor processes and internal controls within the department to deal with the non-compliance in terms of the memorandum of agreement between the national department and the municipality in terms of the INEP conditions. And the department has put the corrective measures in place. But we still recommend that this reduction is financed from future allocations in the department's budget. Can we move to the Department of Transport? So honourable members, this one is a complex one. It's slightly unusual to how we normally kind of deal with things. So just some background here is that this relates to the e-Natus transaction fees that is charged on motor vehicle licenses. So this is the now 72 Rand that we pay every time we renew our motor vehicle license fees. So the requirement for a traffic register of all licensed motor vehicles sits within the National Road Traffic Act. And in moving to an electronic system in, when was this, 2007, 2008, maybe earlier, the Road Traffic Act did not provide for a mechanism to collect revenue for the operations and the maintenance of the e-Natus system. Since the establishment of the Road Traffic Management Agency, which allows, Road Traffic Management Corporation, which allows for functional units to be established for managing road traffic information, we use the Road Traffic Management Agency and the ability to, they have powers to collect fees to pay for the e-Natus contract. But this contract sat with the Department of Transport. So the Department of Transport had a contract for the management of Natus. The revenue to collect this sat with the Road Traffic Management Corporation. The Treasury had an instruction note issued for on how the funds flow. So the RTMC collects the funds. Actually, provinces collect the funds because that's motor vehicle licensing is a provincial function. Provinces collect the funds. The transaction fee amount goes to the RTMC, who deposits into the National Revenue Fund. we then use Section 30 of the PFMA to then appropriate the money to the Department of Transport to pay for the contract with Tassima at the time. The contract also provided for a whole range of provisions to cede this, because the intention was to always cede this contract to the RTMC, because they had the functional responsibility to deal with a whole range of issues around managing road traffic information. But they stopped paying the money into the National Revenue Fund in 2012. And as a result of that, I mean, there was a whole range of court actions that was taking place, but the RTMC stopped paying the money into the National Revenue Fund. The contract obligation still sat with the Department of Transport, which then resulted in unauthorized expenditure in 2013-14, 2014-15, and 2015-16. Now, the RTMC during that period continued to collect the e-Natus transaction fee. They collected 2.1 billion rand over those 3 years. And the fees and the obligations of the Department of Transport over those 3 years was 1.3 billion rand. The reason why we have stopped, we haven't seen any other unauthorized expenditure in the Department of Transport around this, was because of the Constitutional Court judgment in 2016 that finally ceded the contract from the Department of Transport to the RTMC. And so the current arrangements works. The funds are collected by the RTMC for the operations and maintenance of the service. We still think that because the funds was collected by the RTMC and never paid over for the maintenance of the service, is that this is then financed off the future allocations of the Department of Transport. But there's a funny mechanism we have to think about here, because we actually have to collect this money from the RTMC who collected the money originally. But our existing legal framework means that we have to put this obligation back on the DOT for them to be able to collect this money from the RTMC, or find a mechanism to force the RTMC to pay this money back into the National Revenue Fund. So that's transport. Water and sanitation. So I'm going to deal with these because there's two separate issues in relation to water and sanitation. The first relates to the bucket eradication program, or the last iteration of the bucket eradication program. I shouldn't say it's the last one, because it might be the second last one and we might have to do another one. In 2013, so when did we, I can't even remember when we moved the sanitation function from water to human settlements. And we had created, during that period, had created a new bucket eradication program that was supposed to be a 2-year program to deal with eradicating of buckets in formal settlements, not in informal settlements. So this was a 2-year program. We had top sliced, 1.7 billion rand from the Human Settlements Development Grant to create this bucket eradication program that would deal with it was a fixed amount. I think it was 72,000 households, or 72,000 households that still had buckets. The function then shifted back to the Department of Water and Sanitation, so in the following year. So the second year of the program, the function was back with the Department of Water and Sanitation, and we moved the budget for the Department of Water and Sanitation to continue with the program. However, the Department of Water and Sanitation increased the scope of the program, so this was going from buckets to the RDP standard, which is a ventilated pit latrine, into providing waterborne sanitation that was not in the budget and was never budgeted for and never designed in that way. So had gone out and committed funds that was never budgeted for. The program was defined, was never budgeted for in this way, and by extending the scope of the project, had created all sorts of commitments and paid those commitments in 2015-16. However, because these were multi-year projects that they had committed to, the budget had ended because it was a defined 2-year program. The department continued with the work and continued to pay those invoices into the 2016-17 financial year, which resulted in an unauthorized expenditure of, and I put the amount in here, 300 and something million, I can't remember now. But that's what we have there. So those invoices then got paid, which resulted in overspending there. The second overspending or unauthorized expenditure in the department in the 2017-18 financial year relates to the War on Leaks program. Now, the War on Leaks program was conceptualized to deal with high levels of water losses in the country. At the time, the department estimated that the value of our water losses was about 6 billion rand a year, and we needed to develop a training program to train artisans and plumbers and what they call ambassadors, water ambassadors, to help deal with not only the fixing of leaks, but also to deal with kind of water conservation issues and kind of create awareness around reporting leaking taps or leaking pipes, and the importance of kind of trying to save water from dripping taps and all of those things. So, but there was never a budget for this program. It was never budgeted for. The department then decided that they will use the water trading entity, which is the trading account of the Department for Water Resource Management. So all the assets, our big dams, and the assets around our big dams and our bulk distribution pipelines for those dams sits within the water trading entity, and they sell bulk water to water boards, and where there aren't any water boards, to municipalities and other users. So they use the revenue. So this bulk water would do two things, or the revenue for that originally would do two things. It would be for the operations and maintenance of the infrastructure, but it would also be used to finance the debt of the TCA for any new water resource projects that have been undertaken. So instead of doing those two things with the revenue that they got from the water trading entity, the department used the revenue from the water trading entity to fund this program, which resulted, Honorable Chair, you would remember this, in 2017, which resulted in the 3 billion rand deficit in the water trading account by December 2017. So this is where they funded the program from. We then instructed the department to stop all payments in relation to water for water services from the water trading account, because it only deals with water resources. And we asked the department to give us a plan for how they are going to bring that deficit back into a surplus within the water trading account. By having that deficit get to 3 billion rand in December 2017, had placed significant risks on the TCTA's ability it had a bond redemption of 8 billion rand, 8.5 billion rand in August 2018 that they would not have been able to pay. That was guaranteed debt by government, so it created a massive fiscal risk to government if we didn't get the department to stop using the water trading entity to pay for this, and come up with a plan to ensure that there was sufficient revenue in the system and sufficient surpluses in the system that would allow the TCTA to not default on its debt. By doing that, it forced the department to then bring the War on Leaks project into their budget. That was never budgeted for. And as a result of that, had resulted in 2017-18 of unauthorized expenditure of 393 million rand. So during this period, was a period of kind of weak governance, financial governance in the department, almost no internal control. We had the department put together a financial recovery plan, a plan on how they were going to run down those deficits in the water trading entity, and restore all of those balances around all of that. The department has taken various action that is still continuing, and a lot of this sits under the SIU proclamations by the President. But despite all of this, we still recommend that the department, that this expenditure be funded from the future allocations of the department because of this kind of lack of financial governance and internal control. So, Honourable Chairperson, that is where I end. But just on, I don't know, Mampo, do you want me to deal with, what is different from our 2019 submission to the submission we made today would include two issues. The one relates to the Department of Traditional Affairs, where at the time, so the Department of Traditional Affairs, at the time of this unauthorized expenditure, or what they think was unauthorized expenditure, was a department within a vote. And as a department, they were a department within the vote of the Department of Cooperative Governance, even though they were a separate department. But so the overspending in the Department of Traditional Affairs wasn't an overspending on the main division of the vote in the Department of Cooperative Governance, and as a result of that, is not necessarily unauthorized expenditure. And this will have to be fixed within the accounts of the Department of Cooperative Governance because it doesn't reflect in that way. So that's what's different in this submission that we're making today versus what we had presented in 2019. Thanks.
Thank you once more. I will be taking you through the unauthorized expenditure of the Civilian Secretariat for Police Service. The department's financial statements indicates unauthorized expenditure of 5.7 million in 2015-16 financial year. The unauthorized expenditure for Civilian Secretariat for Police Service happened when the department was still under the vote police or SAPS. So the department during that period, it did not have its own vote. So you can, in terms of the PFMA, you can either incur unauthorized expenditure when there is overspending in a main division or a program or at a vote level. Then Civilian Secretariat was almost, but their budget was within the vote police. So since the department did not have a vote when the overspending occurred, the department couldn't have incurred unauthorized expenditure. So in our view, this error it's just a misclassification issue. This error will be rectified through a reclassification of spending in question. Thank you.
Chairperson, just in summary, thank you so much for this. As I said earlier, there are departments that we haven't conducted the investigations, and we're still working with them. Those departments will be DECO, Public Works, Public Enterprises, Women, and the Department of Health. Once we finalize the recommendations, we will definitely speak to your office. So this table, Chairperson and honorable members, is just to give you a summary of the recommendations. We grouped these departments into three. So the first set of departments would be the departments where we're recommending that the funding must be taken from the department's future allocations. The second set of the departments would be where we're proposing that funding should be taken as a direct charge because it was not the fault or the mismanagement on the part of the department. It was events. Those departments, as you can see, it's only three of them. Most of them, we're proposing that they rectify this through a reduction in the later year's budget. And then the last one, Chairperson, would be the Department of Public Service and Administration, where we are not recommending any approval or condonment from the committee, but we have said in the presentation that if the committee does condone this unauthorized expenditure, the recommendation would be then it forms part of the department where this must be rectified through the following year's allocations. So, Chairperson, thank you so much, and honorable members, this is the presentation from the Treasury.
All right. Thank you very much for that. I think, colleagues, let us do department by department. So we go seriatim. Start at the beginning and then deal with vote, dispense with it, deal with the vote and dispense with it, so that there's no confusion and that the matters are not lost. So questions? So we'll start with the first one. If you can put it back up there for those that don't have. There's cocktails. So we'll start with the cocktail one. Honorable Mani. Can I start here and move the mic this way? Maybe Pukas and then the mic will just go there. Using a different system today.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chair, and thank you also for the presentation. Chair, I only have two focus areas, COCTA and Department of Water Affairs, so I will start on COCTA, yes. In noting the presentation, TDG, I must put it on record that it is very difficult for me to understand your role as National Treasury. Firstly, for me, you are responsible for the public purse and to monitor spending. So you must follow up on trends of underspending and remind departments of consequences for wrong spending. I just want to start there. So the Treasury regulations also requires accounting officers to report monthly on unauthorized expenditure. I want to know, especially in this instance, what happens if they don't submit? What happens if they do submit? And what is the process from your side on both instances? Then, if they, for example, do as requires and submit monthly, then you see most the trends on this is there something on. So, how are you assisting or advise? I will ask all the questions, Chair, and then because it's on a vote, and then they can respond. Is it okay? In your view, why is it so difficult to comply with the PFMA, especially the Department of COCTA? Is it negligence? Is it ignorance? Or is it just capacity? And also, is there a change in adhering, or positive or negative? What was the impact in the Department of COCTA on service delivery as a whole, with the underspending on goods and services? And the letter to SCOPA is dated 9 May 2023. Does it mean there is still no consequence management? Why was there no budget allocation for the operation of the commissions? And lastly, Chair, there's no indication of remedial action provided by the department. Has National Treasury requested the information? Thank you, Chair.
Let's get responses, please. You want to put a full set of questions? Okay, you can proceed downwards.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good morning.
Just not all the departmental
DG and the team. I've got only one question. In understanding of the higher than budget expenditure on travel and subsistence, and the matters of legal disputes.
That screen is to enable the people who don't have documents, and I've humbly requested that you make it accessible.
And matters of disputes which have ended up with court challenges. I understand that the commission is no longer in existence, so that's not an issue. But there's a continuous challenges based on the work of the commission. What would be the resultant observation of matters away from what you have identified currently in terms of this unauthorized expenditure, as there is a continuation of such? If you look into my question, it's not necessarily reflective of what is somewhat here, because it might be anticipated that even after this, there would have been such challenges in the courts, and therefore there might have been a resultant some sort of required unauthorized expenditure, one way or the other. How is the department attending to that? What is your actual advice in dealing with those matters?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and my colleagues and TTG and your team. I'm more interested in the recommendation. Do you think that the recommendation that you should finance the reduction of the department's future allocation, is it an effective way of assisting the department to comply? When I look at all the departments, in majority, you have mentioned it as a mitigating factor of some sort. Is it effective? Does it truly assist to ensure that in future departments are able to operate? And when you do that, what is the extent of affecting the department in terms of service delivery and what is expected out of them? So if they receive this money and then you charge them for the past, isn't there any other way of ensuring that we assist them? Because it would seem that then the department would not in future be able to do fully what is expected out of them, and they will still cry about budget allocations because they had to pay for past mistakes that they have conducted. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chairperson, I think Honorable Buick has covered a lot in her approach. So I'm not going to repeat the questions that Chair said, but those are exactly my questions. Because, Chair, I'm struggling to understand the role of National Treasury in terms of them exercising the powers vested in them by the PFMA. I just see spectator department here that are sitting here and pointing fingers everywhere and taking absolutely no responsibility whatsoever for the role that the law has given to them. So I'm struggling to understand, Chairs, to what exactly is their role. Things happen and then later they sit and they come back and say, he did this, he did this, he did this. But the law gives them, if they want particular sections of the PFMA, I can give them. That gives the National Treasury all these powers. But I'm not seeing any proactivity. I just see spectators and people that are just marking up everybody's homework and nothing from their side, as it were. Chairperson, the heading of today is unauthorized expenditure. And I'm struggling to understand, given the fact that the internal audit report of IFMS had all kinds of things around catastrophic findings and all of that, a very, very damning report as to why is it that IFMS has not brought National Treasury in the list of departments under this heading of unauthorized expenditure. Why, Chairperson, are you saying there's some, we're dealing with it as if it's a side issue? From where I see it, it's not a side issue. National Treasury should have been in the list of departments here on the strength of IFMS. So that's my questions for this round.
Thank you very much. My concerns are similar to my colleagues. What concerns me here is this dates back to 2006-2007 in terms of parliamentary terms. That's 2.5 terms ago. Why is this only coming up now? And I think it's very problematic that it does indeed seem that Treasury comments, but Treasury doesn't seem to have any authority to actually exercise actions. And that will also have a bearing on future questions, is I don't actually know how much of an answer Treasury can give at this particular point on some of these unauthorized expenditures. Thank you.
Just on the IFMS issue, IFMS issue is irregular expenditure. It's not unauthorized expenditure. It's irregular. That's why it's not here. So it's dealt with as a side issue. It's dealt with another process, and there have already been 2 engagements on the IFMS. So I just thought I should clarify that in terms of the classification that is there, it's being dealt with in the package of irregular expenditure. and we've engaged the